Welcome to today's process video. Right, so with today's comic, I've obviously gone back to my particular take on Sonic the Hedgehog. And I always enjoy doing these comics. Sonic the Hedgehog is a character I've always enjoyed drawing, ever since I was a child. Even before I ever played a Sonic the Hedgehog game, um, Sonic was just one of those character designs I was always drawn to. Then again, I was always drawn to a lot of video game characters, but Sonic, Mario, the likes of them, I tended to be particularly keen on. And with Sonic the Hedgehog, just to take a step away from talking about my color process for a moment, this was the days before ready access to the internet, where there are there are countless reference images, reference videos that you can pause, you can look through to your heart's content. And back before you had access to stuff like that, you used what you could. And in my case, that tended to be catalogs, like product catalogs, especially the ones that would come around Christmas. And inevitably there would be the kids section towards the back, and in the kids section there would be the various video games that would have been out at the time. And I would have grown up in around the late 80s, early 90s is when I most remember being a kid. And I basically learned how to draw the likes of Mario and Sonic and whatnot just by looking at these tiny, tiny images in a product catalog of, say, the box art for a video game. And in a way, that was kind of my way of learning how to draw characters from various different angles, because I would look at say, I would take one reference image of Sonic, from say one bit of box art, and then I'd find maybe another bit of box art which had a slightly different image, and then I'd draw these, and you would kind of figure out as you went along what the character would look like when they turned around. And one thing I see a lot of in art circles are people who discredit fan art, who look down on fan art. And I think fan art is very important, especially for younger kids, because it's a great way to learn how to draw something, how to learn character design, how to learn the volume of a character, how to learn about um, like the negative space of a character, just all these little things. And I think if a child is learning to draw via drawing their favorite characters, what harm? In fact, I think it's a great thing to see. And I mean, I'm definitely not a child anymore. I'm far from that. But yeah, I've always enjoyed drawing the characters I like. I mean, if you think about it, if you go back to the Renaissance times, all those pictures of Jesus and whatnot, I mean, they were kind of the fan art of their day, if you think about it. Um, and yeah, I think another good thing about like fan art is that it allows for people to take an established thing and just add their own little spin to it to make it more their own. And in changing that thing, they can potentially add something to it. So much so that you're seeing cases now where, in comics, say, where people who did fan art of a particular character get noticed by publishers and are hired to then draw that character because their take was so unique that it caught the owner's eye, say, and they get hired as a result. So yeah, I've talked enough about that. So let's let's talk about the colors for today's comic. So with this, even though my take on Sonic is a bit different with the single eye and all that, I still go for the same kind of color scheme. You know, like the blue fur, the weird fleshy kind of tones of his arms, stomach, and face. And what was fun in this one was actually drawing Dr. Eggman, Dr. Robotnik, for those of you who are a bit older who might remember that name a bit better. I mean, the last time I drew this guy was probably the first year I started doing this comic back in 2014. So again, I stuck with the kind of the established colors because I think sometimes it's good to mess around with like uh, an established character's colors to make it more your own. But in this case, I really wanted to sell these as being these characters, but not quite being off somehow. So yeah, you can see with my version of Eggman Robotnik that I've very much gone for the Eggman kind of look, where he looks like just a giant egg with this tiny face in the middle. And you'll notice in that second panel, the I've gone for like an underlighting kind of effect on Robotnik's face. And if if you're familiar with my comics, you'll notice, I'm sure, or you have noticed that I tend to be very fond of using underlighting effects. Um, like there's, I think they're great for making a scene look extra dramatic, and in this case, making Doctor Robotnik Eggman look a bit more sinister, a bit more evil, which is exactly what I'm going for. Um, Another lighting effect I'm sure you've noticed I'm quite fond of is like a backlit effect, where you'll notice in that final panel of Sonic's rings flying out of him that I have Sonic mostly in shadow, but I have some of his rear lit. And again, I find this is great for a dramatic effect, especially for something like this, which is like a you know, this is Sonic getting hurt, and I really wanted to sell that, so I just add that backlit effect to Sonic while keeping the rings kind of giving them their own light source, which is not really any light source at all. And I feel that brings attention to the rings, mostly to the rings, and then where our eye is drawn to Sonic in the middle. And I'm hoping that even if people aren't entirely familiar with the mechanics of the Sonic games, for those of you who aren't, what happens in the games is when Sonic gets hurt, he loses whatever rings he's holding. And yeah, I was hoping that for anyone who isn't familiar with the games, that maybe the way I've drawn it, that it gets that across. I'm hoping. It's the one it's the one risk of doing fan art comics like this. in that their humor can be far too reliant on what the fans know, but non-fans don't know. And there are certain cases where you can kind of get away with that, where something is very well known. Um, like say if I did a Mario comic that the joke hinged on his jumping. I mean, pretty much everyone knows Mario's whole thing is he jumps. And if I did a comic with Sonic where the joke had to do with his being really fast, and I have done comics like that before, um, most people would get that. However, if someone wasn't familiar with the Sonic games, they may not be so familiar with the fact that he indeed loses his rings when he gets hurt. So, yeah, I'm a bit worried about that aspect of the comic. But that being said, I mean, this is one of those examples where I just drew the comic for me. Um, I mean, while I do have a big audience, I try to I try to not let that influence what I do for the most part. There may be times where I will let the audience influence the direction of my comic, but for the most part, I do these comics mainly for me. And if other people enjoy it, then that's great. And this is just one of those cases where I'll be like, I will admit I was just being very self-indulgent. I just wanted to draw something I knew I would have fun with it, and that I would like coloring it and all that. So yeah, I'm hoping that people like it. But I mean, if they don't, what harm? I still enjoyed it, so that's what matters. So, anyways, look, I've talked for way too long. I've talked for long enough. So I will leave it at that. Thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you at the next video. Take care.